From the nation's capital, this is the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast with your host, Rob Snowhite.
Thank you for downloading the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. My name is Rob Snowhite, your host for this Series 2, Episode 58. We head down to Sapidus Farm to hang out with Oyster Mike, his wife and daughter, and find out about how he grows the oysters that we've been eating at several events for the last couple of years. This podcast is brought to you by Ayobayo, locally made South African-style meats. If you're going to have some of these oysters, I suggest you get some biltong or some meat sticks, and you can have yourself a little surf and turf. Go to ayobayo.com, and please follow Vion on all of your social media. He's doing some really cool things. A lot of beer pairing events up here in the Northern Virginia area. We definitely want to get him on the podcast soon to tell his story. So we set out about 9 a.m. on a Sunday morning recently to head down the northern neck to the great Wicomico River. And you will find out about the northern neck later on. I'd never been down there. I went to school sort of at the top between the two rivers where this body of land exists, but I'd never been down there. So it was pretty cool that Mike invited us down. And it was about a 3-hour drive. The way home was about 4.5 with traffic. It was a long day. I'm glad Dr. Jones can hold it in. It was very hot that day. We had the AC blasting, and we listened to, I don't know, at the same time, probably 5 different country music countdowns going on. We got to Mike's house around 11:30 in the morning, hung out, and it was like a vacation home. It was awesome. Mike's definitely got a good thing going on. So listen to Oyster Mike and the podcast. You finally get to hear what the wife sounds like. She's actually going to listen to this podcast. Hey, lady, how's it going? All right, so without further ado, let's get into this Ayobayo-sponsored aquaculture podcast. And Jason, we're going to have to get you some of these oysters at some point too. We are at Mike's house right now, owner of Sapidus Farms. We're having lunch at the moment. A bunch of fresh produce from the garden. We just went and picked cucumbers and garlic and some dill and all sorts of fantastic stuff down by their pond. After lunch, we are going to head out to the oyster farm and learn a little bit about what Mike does for a living and how he can handle this drive from down here in the northern neck all the way up to DC area several times a week. I'm looking forward to actually seeing Mike's operation after knowing him for several years and eating his oysters. They are probably some of the best I've ever had. I think they're the best ones you can get in the DC metro area. And my daughter's playing with his daughter. My wife's hanging out with his wife. His dogs are in the basement because they are rather large. The Pixie is not large at all. You know we're near the beach right now, or the shore, because the driveway's got sand under the CR6, which is the concrete. I only know that from my engineering days. And there's oyster shells everywhere. That's how you know we're with an oyster farmer. The floor of the walkways in the garden. The garden was like maybe 40 feet by 20 feet. It was huge. And just oyster shells everywhere for the walkway. You can hear the bugs out here. It's absolutely beautiful. There's no sound except the bugs in the trees. The air has this sweet aroma to it. We have a mix of hardwood pine and some old oak trees. This is definitely different ecosystem here in the Tidewater than where we are just off the Tidewater towards the Piedmont. This is definitely relaxing. Mike's back window looks out onto a pond. So we're going to go down there and throw some frogs in a bit, see what we can pull up. The wife wants to fish. The Pixie wants to fish. You really can't beat a day out of the city like this. Listen to those bugs. This is like a vacation home. There's some birds. 1-lane roads on the way down here. Just the opposite of back home. All right, Mike, where are we right now?
So this is the Oyster Nursery. This is where the beginning of the process starts. So I get larvae from a hatchery where they breed them in captivity, and then they sell those larvae in the last larval stage of development just before they become a shelled oyster, and that's called an eyed larvae. They're called eyed because they have a little spot on them. And I take them through the last stage of metamorphosis into a shelled oyster in a setting tank, which is my fancy word for it is a recirculating downweller, but it's basically just an aquarium. I have that in the other room.
All right. How big is this facility we're in right now?
I guess about 60 by 24, something like that, give or take. It used to be an old crab shedding shed for doing soft shell crabs, but I converted it over to Oyster Nursery when I bought the place. So this is the setting tank, and this is where the larvae go into when I get them. I fill this up with water to about here, and then I recirculate the water with a pump, and then I aerate and I heat, and I keep it about 82 degrees. And this mesh right here is 125 microns.
Mesh.
Yep, that's a mesh.
Whoa.
125 microns. So the larvae, when I get them, are about 250 microns or so. So this keeps them stuck on the mesh. And I give them really finely ground pieces of oyster shell to attach to. So in the wild, the larvae will swim around until they find something to attach to. Their preference is other oyster shell, and that's how you end up with an oyster reef. But in this situation, I want individual oysters, so I give them very finely ground oyster shell that gets sieved out between 400 and 500 microns. So the shell pieces are between 400 and 500 microns. And a micron is 1/1000th of a centimeter, I believe. 1/1000th of a meter, maybe. I don't know. I can't remember. Anyway, it's really small. So grains of sand, basically, is about the size of the mesh. So I had larvae in here a couple weeks ago, and I moved them over, and they are now in this tank. And I put them on 400 micron mesh and I drained this tank because it was overflowing a little bit and it needs to get sprayed. But I put them on 400 micron and then colch, and then they sit on this 300 micron mesh in these two tanks as their first round. And that way, once they've attached to that piece of shell, they aren't going to fall through the mesh because the shell is bigger than the mesh opening. Once they get big enough from here, they'll move into the rest of the tanks, and the rest of the tanks have window screen, which is about 1250 microns opening. And as they get bigger from here, they'll move out into the actual river. Now, all the water inside this nursery is running through those pipes off the end of the wharf. I have 3 submersible pumps out there, and I pump the water up into this building through all the tanks, and then it outflows back out cleaner than when I bring it in, because the oysters are filtering all the algae out of the water.
What's the time frame going from?
So they spend a week 5 days in the setting tank, undergoing the last stage of metamorphosis in shelled oysters. They'll spend 3 weeks to a month in the 300 micron, and then they'll spend a month to 2 months in these tanks, depending on the time of year that I start them. This time of year, they're growing like crazy. I mean, they're putting on
temperature.
Temperature and food availability. Yeah, so they'll grow a quarter inch every 2 days or so.
Wow.
Yeah.
How about that?
So they're really cooking, and you can see on. You can see that clear lip on the edge. That's all new growth.
How about that?
See that? It's razor sharp too. You got to be really careful dealing with these gloves. They're the #1 safety equipment for this. So as they move through this entire thing, they get bigger and bigger, and then we sort them out and we put them out into polyethylene mesh bags. And those mesh bags range anywhere from 3/16 openings up to 3/8 and then 3/4 of an inch. And once they get big enough, then from there they graduate into the 1-inch grow out cages. And you can see this line of 1-inch grow out cages is right here along the shore. Those are all 4 foot by 3 foot by 14 inches tall, 2-tiered with a lid. And so I have maybe 600, 500, 600 of those cages spread out. You can see all the buoys along the spit out there are all grow out. That's all grow out stuff. That's all grow out. And then I've got another couple hundred, maybe 300 or so out on out on the river off the point there. And then random other cages all over the place. So the bags will go into a bunch of different types of things, but the best things I found are those floating racks. So you see those PVC pipes right over there. They have a rack underneath of them made out of this wire mesh, sort of like that, but with larger wire mesh underneath of them. And the bags slide into those and hang 5 deep. Algae grows best where it can get the most sunlight, and that's the top.
You have to rotate them out?
No. They're good in that. The top 5 feet or so of the water column is where you're going to get the most algae growth and the best flow as well during the tidal shifts. So floating like that for the small stuff is really best. They grow best in that environment.
How much water can they suck in and spit out in a day?
So an adult oyster filters about 50 gallons a day. For these little guys, a few gallons on up, depending on the size of the oyster. But for the nursery, I'm flowing, I get a little minutes. I think 17,000 gallons per hour through my nursery.
My goodness. When friends of ours put in a beehive, everyone in the neighborhood said, my flowers are improving.
Yeah.
Have people commented maybe about just the water clarity?
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody around here is happy that I'm doing what I'm doing. They already knew the benefits. A lot of them have their own personal oyster floats off their docks. They know the benefits of having oysters in the bay. And so the vast majority of them are happy. The only negative comments we ever get in our industry, and I haven't really dealt with it so much, is just that it's not pretty to look at when there's buoys in the water. But, that's part of a working waterfront, and that's part of the beauty of the Northern Neck, I think, is that it is still a working water community.
Can you explain the Northern Neck and the water we're on here for those that are not from Virginia?
Yep. So in the Chesapeake Bay, just below the boundary between Virginia and Maryland, the boundary being the south bank of the Potomac on the western shore of the Chesapeake, there is a peninsula created by the Potomac and the Rappahannock known as the Northern Neck of Virginia. And we are on the Great Wicomico, which is at the very end of the Northern Neck, just off the bay. It's a direct tributary to the bay, and it's only about a 30-mile long river. But it is home to the largest single oyster population on the east coast of the United States. We have a great oyster estuary here, and I'm contributing to that with my cages, but there are a lot of wild oysters out here also doing a really good job of reproducing. In fact, a lot of guys who do more traditional farming methods of dropping shell down to catch wild strike and then moving it to their other grounds will drop their shell here in the Great Wicomico to catch the strike, because the strike is so notoriously good. And then they'll use that spat on shell to seed beds in the Rappahannock, the Potomac, Little Wicomico, Piankatank, all over the place around here. So this is the oyster estuary for sure of the bay.
What's the tide at right now?
We're low and maybe even slack, it looks like.
Yeah, full moonish? Yeah, it might actually be full moon tonight.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Do you ever have raccoons come down here and try and pick through?
I have had a few raccoons, yeah. I've had some more possums than raccoons. I caught a couple possums in some of the crab traps on the dock before, and it's not a pleasant experience trying to get them out of there.
Are these yours right here?
Yeah.
Submerged?
Yeah.
Is this all self-taught?
Self-taught? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Is there Oysters for Dummies book? Like how to start your own oyster farm?
There are certainly plenty of scholarly articles on the subject matter. The Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, which is part of the College of William & Mary, they put on oyster aquaculture conferences every year where you can come and learn about the industry. They also provide educational opportunities and are really legitimately there to answer any question. I know a lot of people down there now, and I know that I can call them in their office and they will be happy to have my call and happy to answer whatever questions I have. And if they don't know the answer, they will figure it out and call me back. So the state's really good about providing the information necessary and the training. But a lot of this was self-taught, and my parents were actually both marine biologists by education. One of my sisters is working on her PhD in marine biology right now also. So I have a lot of marine knowledge in the family that I can pick from. and my parents were actually both working on clam hatcheries earlier in their educational careers, so they had some experience sort of in the same vein as this. Not too much difference between a clam and an oyster.
Something's getting crashed right there in the water. Bait fish?
Yeah, probably bull minnows. We get a lot of bull minnows in the shallows. Out in the river, you'll see bunker running around, and I don't know. It's probably stripers crashing on them, to be honest with you. We get a
Saw
lot
the
of
two
stripers.
rods just sitting right in there.
Yeah. You got to keep them.
Come out and
they're
just,
ready.
if you see a striper, just
Yeah.
busting bait, just cast at them.
Yep, 2 Llama Gloss with Shimano reels. If Llama Gloss or Shimano wants to sponsor Sapidus Farms, you guys give me a call.
Absolutely.
So I keep those at the ready. Actually, we've seen some neat stuff out here. We pulled a seahorse out of one of the cages not that long ago. I caught a massive, and I mean probably as big as my arms can make a circle, and I'm a big guy, I got about 6 foot wingspan. Stingray right off the dock. We had about a 4 foot, maybe 5 foot bull shark thrashing around
Very
out in the
cool.
creek here not that long ago. We catch spade fish, we catch puppy drum, we catch croaker like you wouldn't believe, white perch, lots of rockfish obviously. We catch flounder and hog chokers. The flounder sometimes are big enough to eat too. And we get the dolphins come in a couple times a year and play here on the farm for a little while. And apparently there's like a new subspecies of dolphin specific to the Chesapeake Bay. I heard that the other day, and I'm
There's
not.
some grants to research Potomac dolphins.
Yeah, so I think that's in that subspecies of ones that stick to the Chesapeake Bay for a big portion of their life cycle. So, we get some neat stuff. And then if you get out into the bay from here, just south of here, there's a creek called Dividing Creek, and people catch big old cobia off of that. They'll catch big bull drum. There's nothing I think more fun than fighting with a big bull red.
I caught a puppy drum once. That's all.
Yeah,
That's all I can deal with.
I have caught plenty of puppy drum, but I have caught a few big bull red down in Florida before, and they are fighters. We used to get a lot of speckled trout too, really big ones too. My biggest one off of the dock was 28 inches, and that's a nice big speckled trout. That's like a Florida trout. But we had a die off maybe 4 or 5 winters ago, and we haven't really seen any in here since then, which is unfortunate because they're good eating for what they are. Not the most fun to fight, but they taste good.
In your industry, any issues with water salinity, higher tides, climate change?
Yeah, certainly tides are a problem. Salinity fluctuates. Since we're in the mouth of a creek and an estuary, we do get pretty high fluctuations in salinity, almost 10 parts per thousand. It can fluctuate.
Does that affect the flavor?
If it affects the flavor of the oysters, and if we get a massive freshwater run real quick, you can have some die-off as a result of that. The tides have been more and more extreme. We've been getting a lot of flooding during some of the more extreme high tides and high rain events. The hurricanes can certainly make for real big problems for you. There have been a number of times where I've sat down here for days running a generator waiting for power to come back on, and had to walk from my house down to the farm because there were trees across power lines the whole way, kind of thing. So and just the flooding in general can be a real pain in the butt. But it's Mother Nature, and it's going to be what it's going to be. And unfortunately, I think that it's going to be we're past the point of no return with the climate being what it is. So just going to have to deal with it as it comes. That's all you can do.
Does not look like a place you should be walking around barefoot either.
Hell no. No, absolutely not. Oyster shells galore. Yeah. No, I wouldn't do that. We get a lot of snakes down here, so they're usually pretty harmless. I've only seen a couple copperheads. For the most part, it's just the water snakes, which I don't think they're moccasins. I'm pretty sure they're just those non-venomous water snakes. So, but, better safe than sorry. Don't stick your hand into their mouth.
Nope. So when it's harvest time, if you have to do an event or you're doing restaurants, what's the process?
So I'll take you into the dock and I'll show you sort of the end of the whole process.
And how much do these cages weigh?
Empty or
not look-
full?
I'd say empty, they look heavy enough.
Empty, probably, I don't know, 20 pounds. They're not that bad, maybe 25. I'm not a great judge of it, though. I pick this stuff all the time, and it doesn't feel as heavy to me, I guess, as it might actually feel.
There's crabs, Kiersey, look.
Where?
Those look like killifish or mamachogs, maybe.
You see it moving?
There's a couple of crabs down there.
Oh, yeah, there's lots and lots of crabs. Yeah, there's lots of oyster shells. A lot of those shells out there are actually oysters.
What does this do?
So this is my tube sorter. This is how I grade the oysters. And I actually have a second tube you can see hanging up in there for the smaller stuff. So this organizes the oysters by size and helps me get them into the appropriate sized container. Okay. So the mesh for the bags runs from 3/16 to 3/8 to 3/4, and that's what that small tube does. Anything that falls through the first set of holes is for the first size bags, second, third.
So it's dropping into these.
So yeah, so if it's too small. Now with this one, this is my market tube. If it comes out of the end of the tube and falls into a basket, then it's ready to be hand sorted for a market sized oyster.
What was that?
There's a fish jumping there.
Oh, there's a sea nettle down there too.
There's
Oh,
oysters
there are-
right there, kiddo.
A lot of nettles.
Billions of nettles. Yeah, this is nettles.
Oh yeah, there's a redfish right there.
I don't have my glasses.
That was a drum.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to go set up the rod.
There's a what's it called?
Jelly.
Jellyfish.
That's the sea nettle.
Yeah, there's a lot of just.
Is
I
that
caught.
jellyfish?
It's
the name of the
same
sea
thing.
nettle.
Yeah, I caught one of those in the eye the other day.
What, in your eye?
Super unpleasant. Yeah.
Like it flung its.
Yeah, I was emptying bags onto the table,
Without
and it was on the table, and I didn't have glasses on, and I smacked the bag to get the oysters to fall out, and it bounced off and smacked me right in the eye. For the first 3 minutes, it was terrible, and then after that, it was bearable for the rest of the day.
Don't get too close to this. How deep is it here?
She can swim.
4 feet?
No, it's not 4 feet. It's 2.5 feet,
Okay,
3
just
feet.
don't
You
get
could
too
stand
close.
up, yeah, but you don't want to
There's
go in there.
crabs in there and stuff.
Yeah, and there's oyster shells and stinging jellyfish. They'll hurt you. You don't want that. So this thing sorts out my market-sized oysters. When I get the market-sized oysters that are ready to go out, I bring them back inside the boathouse with my boat in here, and I put them into.
This is the boat?
This is the boat. Yep, the barge, and I put them into bins inside of these Taylor floats. And so Thursday morning when I am going up to Maryland, or Friday morning when I'm going to Washington, D.C., I will come in here and pull up these baskets, put them through the tube sorter to clean the oysters off, and then count them out and bag them at my bagging station, which you can see right over there, and it's got its little bag. Yeah, there's lots of them.
How do the crabs get in there?
They'll just climb through. There's spaces.
Okay.
And nobody messes with these oysters? I mean, this is all so open.
You mean human beings or critters?
Human beings.
No, so Virginia is really very serious about poaching.
Okay.
So if you're, that's my barge. Yeah, it's a beauty, isn't she? Her name's Seafood. Yeah, and if you get that reference, you and I can be friends.
It doesn't look like a boat.
It doesn't look like a boat, does it? It looks like a floating dock with a motor, doesn't it? Yeah, but it's useful. $10,000 fine for your first time. Wow, poaching. Yeah.
How can people get on it?
You can hop on down here. Let me pull it closer to the dock so you can hop aboard.
Permission to come aboard.
All right, hop on.
Oh, there's a whole bunch of nettles in there.
Oh, yeah.
Look at that.
So this boat or barge is made out of sheet PVC.
Did you make this?
I didn't. I had a local boat builder build it for me. They did a really nice job. It's perfect for what I do. But it's all sheet PVC, so I don't have to pull it. I don't have to worry about rot or worms or anything. It's impervious, invincible. And then the inside is framed with lumber, treated lumber. And then there's a big old framing inside underneath of the davit there that I use to pull the cages out of the water. So that's my main puller right there. And then I have these things that I had a local machinist make for me, and there's a crane out on the main dock, like a little dock davit, and I use that to pull up the baskets because they get kind of heavy.
Do you have other baskets out there?
So I have, yeah, we get a lot of jellyfish. So this is all market stuff that I've sorted out for market. I know is ready to go.
Oh, it's all okay.
And then I have cages upon cages upon cages out there. I think we've got close to 600 cages in the water right now. We're actually one of the larger cage operations. And there's me and one other person working for me, and she's part-time. So I don't know.
And it's marked by the buoys?
Yeah, each
those all yours?
buoy's a cage. Yep. Yep.
How do they get in?
How do the oysters get into that cage? I put them in there. That's where I placed them.
So they're already bagged up.
Some of them, yeah, those were returns.
Returns?
Yeah, so I take returns too.
What do you mean?
So because I am the farmer and I'm not a wholesaler, and I'm leaving from the farm to go to the restaurant, and then I'm going back to the farm afterwards.
Yes.
If a restaurant orders oysters from me and doesn't use their entire order in a week because they have a slow week for whatever reason, I will take those leftover oysters back and credit them 1 for 1 on that week's delivery.
So they don't go back?
I am. So they won't go bad. They're still alive, and they'll go back into the water and be just fine, and in 2 weeks they can go back out for sale. I usually leave them for a little longer than that just to be safe. But yeah, so that's one of my more popular programs here, is because, it creates a situation where the restaurant isn't going to have any food loss costs, which is great for them, and it makes sure that the product is as fresh as possible for their guests. So that's great for me, because it means people are only going to be enjoying a fresh Sapidus Farms Happy Oyster. So it's a win-win-win. Everybody wins. And there aren't very many situations in the world where everybody wins, and that's one of them. So I feel pretty good about being part of it.
Let's talk about eating them.
Yeah,
Are you like Bubba from Forrest Gump? Like, do you guys eat oysters 3 meals a day?
Not as much as my wife would like, I think. But no, every couple weeks we'll have them. Angelina likes them raw. I'm all right eating them raw. They're not my favorite way to eat them. Isabel likes eating them cooked. She likes fried oysters. Everybody likes fried oysters, though. So we'll fry them every once in a while. I baked them for my parents and my family a couple weeks ago, a month ago. You want to go for a ride? Yeah, we can go for a ride. We can go look at some of the cages.
What about the health benefits? I claim that I didn't get sick at one of the events because I ate so many oysters.
So yeah, they are a superfood. They're extremely high in zinc, which is good for a lot of different stuff. They have vitamin A, vitamin K, a couple of the vitamin Bs. They're high in protein.
Pure protein.
Yeah, pure protein, yeah. And they are high in cholesterol, but they say that they don't really know one way or the other about cholesterol's health benefits at this point, so I'm just saying it just to say it.
Okay. I think we have a question down here.
Yeah.
Where do fish come from?
Where do fish come from? Eggs, usually. Fish eggs. This
Yeah.
is an oyster podcast. Come on now. Get with the program, child. What's the biggest oyster you've ever grown? Do you have one that's named?
I got a pet. I got a couple pets out there in one of the floats if you want to see them.
Just keep growing and see how big they'll get?
Yeah, they were from my original garden.
I'll have him.
They got to be 10 years old at this point.
How long can an oyster live?
Is
like a lobster, indefinitely?
I've not heard an answer to that, actually, and I've asked that question. I've talked to some of the scientists at VIMS, and they say that they don't know specifically how long they can live, but
They just keep getting bigger?
they just keep getting bigger and bigger, yeah. Here, let me grab the...
Can we go on the boat now?
We're going to go on the boat in just a minute, yeah.
Do you want to see Mike's pet oyster?
Oh, you've got a whole just nursery of juvenile fish and the nettles and crabs.
Yeah, it's Critter
This is
Central.
pretty cool out here.
You just let that one hang out in there?
I let all those in there, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh.
That thing is...
It's big enough.
I'm going to get a picture. Oh.
Let's get it out in the sun.
Kiersey, do you want to hold this one?
No.
No? Look at that. And are there other animals on it, Kiersey?
Yes.
I love that briny smell.
Yeah, that's 10 years old, give or take.
Did you get a picture of me holding it, lady?
Mama, I think
That's a big oyster.
No, I'm not giving you. Here.
Now, something like this taste good?
In the industry, we call stuff like that gagger.
You've not be able to swallow that thing.
No, that's not a raw oyster. You could cook it, and it'd be good for stew or something like that. But I wouldn't eat it raw. I don't even think I'd eat it fried, to be honest with you. It's a little too much for me.
How long can they stay out of the
That's
water?
prehistoric.
Depends on the temperature outside, but in a refrigerator, they can last for weeks and weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
I always think they're so vulnerable that you have to eat them within an hour of buying them.
No, they're
Look at all those
they're pretty
crabs.
hardy critters.
Are those sponges?
Yeah, we get a lot of sponges.
My
Yeah,
God, there's
sponges.
so many critters out here.
Yeah,
My feet are getting burnt.
And then red-brown algae?
yeah.
Rhodophyta, maybe? I can't remember.
I don't know. I don't know any of those names. But yeah, lots and lots. We get a lot of crabs. I usually keep the traps in the water. We eat crabs a couple times a week during crab season. Occasionally I'll get a soft crab too. The soft crabs like to come up, or the peelers like to come up into the floats and peel in the floats because they
Safe?
Yeah, because they know they're protected there. Not for me though, because I got to dip it. So yeah, that's.
What were you doing before this? Well, and what was the decision? You'd be like, I'm gonna work outside, wear shorts, sandals all summer.
Yeah, I'd be in trouble if I wore sandals at work here, but today I'm wearing them. I used to teach American government to 11th graders in southern Maryland, and my parents bought a house down here in the Northern Neck, and I really loved the area, and I was coming here with my summers off. We got an oyster garden going off the dock, and that's where those guys are from.
Okay.
Off our dock at the house back where we were earlier. And I started doing some research on the oyster farming industry, and when I decided I was going to leave teaching, I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I read an article that said it was the fastest growing industry in the state of Virginia, and I thought, well, if it's growth industry, then that means that it's going to be doing well. So let's give it a shot, and that was in 2009. I started the farm, and here I am, 8 years later, and I'm not working any other part-time jobs finally. Just working 70 to 80 hours a week here. So
How long was it before you started that you were bringing stuff to market or selling?
took me 2 years. So in 2009, I incorporated and planted my first crop, and I did not harvest for market until 2011. It takes about 2 years to get a market-sized oyster, and even then, I was losing money on my trips to Maryland to deliver because I was only supplying a handful of really small places because I just didn't have the stock. But I wanted to start building a name and a reputation, and so that's what I had to do for the first couple of years, was kind of lose money on my trips.
How far are those drives?
So now I put it around 1,000 miles a week on my van.
What time do you get up in the mornings?
I get down here on a normal work day at 5:30, and on a delivery day I get down here about 4:30.
I imagine the stars are pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty here. We get some bioluminescent algae,
Nice.
and that's pretty neat. And yeah, it's quiet. It's a quiet and pretty place. So I'm kind of living the dream right now.
All right, question.
Are oysters small or big?
It depends on how old they are. Some of my oysters are super small. In fact, I was going to go up to the barn and get our microscope so you could take a look at some of the smallest ones underneath of the microscope that are just tiny babies. Do we want to do that next? Yeah, I think that sounds cool.
And then the boat.
And then we'll go on the boat. Yep. All right, I'm into all that. Can we wait for my wife to get back down here for the boat? Because I'm sure she'll want to go for a quick boat ride.
Is it that boat or the other one?
It's the other one.
Wait,
That's
it's
our.
a boat?
That's just a floating dock.
Okay.
That was an upweller for a while, but it's janky.
An
So-
upweller?
Yeah, an oyster nursery. So it draws water up over a screen that the oysters rest on, and then dumps it out the side. So it's upwelling the water, or welling the water up over the oysters.
What are those things?
That's just algae growing.
Red brown algae. Good, healthy stuff, though.
Yeah, we haven't had any crimson or red tides or anything like that in the Great Wicomico, so we haven't had any bad algae so far.
Let's talk about, oysters can get a bad reputation. Any myths you'd want to debunk?
Well, the most common one you hear is the R month thing, that you should only eat oysters in months with letter R, and that used to be true before mechanical refrigeration, but now that we have mechanical refrigeration and really tight controls set by the FDA and then enforced by your local health departments, we are able to supply a healthy, safe product year-round. That's the big one, is that summer oysters are just as good as winter oysters, if not better, I think, because they have the algae in them, so they have that extra sort of minerally, spinachy, cucumbery kind of flavor to them that they don't get in the winter. So that's one thing. And the other thing is a question I get asked all the time, and it kind of, I guess I can see why people ask it, but do I ever find pearls? My oysters are not pearl oysters. They don't produce pearls. In fact, Crustacea virginica and Pacifica gigas, the two main oysters we eat in this country, neither of them produce a pearl. And the most common pearl oyster is actually a species of mussel, and it's not an actual.
And those have
oyster.
to plant.
Yeah, for farming
seed or something.
Yeah, so
inside
for
of
farming, they'll wait for the oyster to be gapped open underneath water, breathing, and then they'll stick something in there to keep it propped open, and then place little granules of sand in between the mantle and the shell.
Needlefish.
Yeah, we eat a lot
Gross.
of needlefish. We eat lots of them.
They're about as bad as gizzard shad for smell.
Yeah, I have not. I've not had the misfortune of that. We get pipefish too. Those are kind of neat looking.
But no gizzards. You're lucky.
I haven't seen any gizzards now.
That's bad. I say they're the Jawa of the fish species. No one likes them.
So those are the two big myths, I guess.
What about opening them?
Pain in the ass sometimes.
It's pretty dangerous because if we're
Can
gonna, I've never tried. I see Alex with you at the Healing Waters.
Yeah,
he's going to town. I'm like, I'll let him do that.
Yeah, Alex is good at it actually. I was a little wary at first when he first came over and asked me to help 3 years ago, and he did a good job. So I said, "Screw it, I'll take free help."
Heck yeah!
Plus, Alex is a super nice guy. I really like him. I was hoping he was going to come down and visit. I'm sure at some point he will. Yeah, this is welcome to my everyday. All I do is I hear fish jump and I say, "Damn it!"
I need to go start.
I have a question.
Question.
Where are the pearls for the oysters?
Did you not just hear that? He just answered that.
Where are the pearls? So the pearls come from the South Pacific. They come from pearl oysters, which are a type of mussel. What are those? Those are just dead shells. We call those boxes.
And how much do you have to grind them up yourself? Did you just toss them in a bowl?
There's a guy up in Reedville that I know who specializes in oyster. Selling oyster seed, and he's got a grinder that he uses to grind up the shell, and I think it was for like gravel or something like that. And then a vibratory sieve sorter, and I'm actually in the market for a vibratory sieve sorter right now myself to sort out my seed. It's funny, a lot of the equipment,
I can interpret that so differently.
Yeah. A lot of the equipment we end up using in this industry is borrowed from other industries. So a vibratory sieve sorter is really popular in both the pharmaceutical industry for sieving out granules of different sizes on very fine mesh, and then it's also very popular in the sort of dirt, gravel, sand industry for organizing their products by like sizes. Yeah. And so it's a useful piece of equipment for small oysters because it does a good job of sorting out the really fine little oysters.
Oysters are big and small.
We determined that, yes.
True statement.
So I read that Kim Jong-il only ate a certain size grain of rice. But I'm not sure if he had a sorter for that, or I think people had to hand sort the rice. That's how you know you're really crazy.
Yeah, that, or you've just got that kind of power, man. I mean, who was it Keith Richards only ate brown M&Ms? Is that? I can't remember. Somebody like that.
Heroin?
Yeah. Anyway. Why not? I mean, if you can make people do it for you, why not do it, you know?
So how many hours do you spend down here a day?
Oh, a lot. It depends. This time of year is a lot heavier than the winter because everything's growing right now. It all needs to be sorted and organized and cleaned because I get so much fouling with all these algae and sponges, and we got all these other predators in the water, so you got to make sure there aren't crabs in the cages with the small stuff and all kinds of other stuff. So right now I'm working A really slow week for me right now would be 60 to 65 hours. A long, heavy week with a lot of events, I'd be up to 80 hours or so. But then in the winter, like January through March, when things are really slow, I'll drop down to 45, 50 hours a week. But I'm working for myself, and I'm working on the water.
Yeah.
And I do something I love, and so
5 minutes.
Yeah,
from home, so you can go home for a sandwich, come back.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, it's worth the time. The events are the thing that are, I think, the most fun, because that's where I get to meet people and share my enthusiasm.
Any crazy stories from an event?
Oh, I've seen some wild stuff.
People like having contests, you can eat the most.
I've seen some of that. Yeah, I've seen some pretty ridiculous stuff. I've done some I've done some events.
Bachelor parties?
I haven't done that. I did a golf tournament for a restaurant that was I've done it for a few years now, and it got a little bit more tame this year. I think last year it was a little overboard when the strippers crashed the beer cart on the golf course. And
I don't want to know where the oysters were eating.
We were right by that. So I was paired with a vodka at that one, and so oyster shooters galore. Wow. But that one was really an intense experience. I'm glad my wife didn't come work that one with me. She would have been shaking her head the whole day. But no, and then I've gotten to do some really fantastic stuff. I got to do the University of Maryland. I got to shuck on Bird Stadium field for a home football game, and that's my alma mater for the dean of the school I graduated from, which was really a fantastic experience. I've gotten to do Project Healing Waters for the past 4 years now, and I hope and plan to be a part of that for the rest of my career. I've worked with CCA in Maryland and Virginia. They're both great organizations doing great stuff. I've worked with a friend of mine. He set up a fundraiser, which is actually how I got linked up with Project Healing Waters. He did a trap and skeet tournament on the Eastern Shore for a few years, raising money for wounded vets and organizations that support wounded vets. I've done backyard barbecues. I've done high-end weddings. The whole gamut. And I've met some really fantastic people through them, and had a lot of fun. And it's one of my favorite parts about this job is getting out there and sharing it with other people.
Do you get to change people's minds? They're like, "Oh, I want to eat oysters. I've never had one," and they slurp it down, and you see their eyes light up.
Yeah. I've taken quite a few oyster virginities in my time. Yeah, no, I always like that a lot. My favorite is when little kids come up and they're just pounding oysters because they've already eaten them and they know they like them, and they're just hammering at the oyster tray. It always makes me really happy. But no, I've had a lot of people say, "Oh no, I don't," and then I've talked them into having one, and they said, "You know what? It's either, you know what, that wasn't that bad, or you know what, I kind of love that, and I'm kind of going to be eating those from now on." So, yeah, it's a good part of the job too.
Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, let's take a break, and then we'll start up again when we're on the boat.
All right.
We can go play around a little bit.
See the microscope?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So we're on a boat now. Like the SNL skit, I'm on a boat. Where are we headed?
We're just doing a tour of the farm. We're going to drive around the mouth of Typers Creek and out onto the Great Wicomico for a minute, and then come on back to the dock, I guess. Maybe do a little fishing in between.
And I almost stepped on your spud pole?
Yeah, my spud poles. So when I had a bunch of my shoreline remediated, they brought in a barge with a pile driver on it to drive the piles for the wharf and the dock, and it had these poles that slid down slots on the edges of the boat to anchor it in place, sort of like power poles, but they were, just hand poles to stick in the ground. And I said, "Hey, that's a great idea. What are those?" And they said, "Oh, those are our spud poles." And I said, "Well, I'm going to do that for my oyster barge, because trying to anchor yourself in place while you're pulling oyster cages is impossible, especially in the wind." So I got a 20-foot section of aluminum pipe and cut it at an angle and a half so that it became a spear, and then I had some aluminum rectangle stock and some flat and angle iron stock, welded onto it to make little slots on the side of the boat, and so I can anchor myself down, and you can leave one spud pole in and use it as a pivot point and actually rotate the boat around as well, so you can work your way through an entire section of cages, kind of wiggling your way through them so that you're lined up, and you're basically a stationary dock with a davit or a crane on the dock on the boat. So it makes it much easier.
How long does it take once you leave the dock to do a round out here?
Less than 30 minutes to grab 10 cages or so. And that's 10's about the max I can fit on the boat.
Do you ever have kids and tour groups come out?
I've done a few. I actually have a summer camp for Isabel's school coming on Monday to do a tour of the farm. They're doing a farm-to-table week at school, so we're going to be doing a little tour of the oyster farm, and then they're going to have a chef come in and cook some oysters for them and show them how to shuck them. And,
my goodness.
Yeah, they do serious stuff down there.
All right.
So you can hear my 15 horsepower two-stroke. That's a 1990 Mercury Mariner right there, and she has been in service with really minimal maintenance for that entire time, 25 years now. And the only thing I've ever had to do is yank the carburetor and rebuild it and run it through a parts washer. But otherwise, she's true. Starts in 14-degree weather, starts in 110-degree weather. She starts.
There's a lot more nettles out here than I was expecting. It's every square foot.
It's not good swimming weather right now.
Oh.
They came in about a month ago, and they'll be here until September. And you will get stung if you get in the water. A couple years ago, Angelina, you said, I'm just going to jump in. I'm not too worried about it. And then as soon as you jumped in, you turned right back around, swam to the boat. And
Gotta pee on me now.
They came right after you.
Pee on me though.
He had to pee on his eye the other day.
Yeah, because I caught one in the eyeball.
Whew.
He doesn't like it like that though.
I added this little folding ladder here for them when they go swimming off the boat.
I feel like we're going into Hades right now.
See, like you're what?
Going into Hades, taking the barge across.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. So here's some of our oyster cages here on the spit. These are some of the smallest stuff. This has not been sorted yet from the 1-inch cage, so it's been put in as barely bigger than the 1-inch mesh. And so this is smaller stuff at the moment. It probably is, 1.5 or so at its short point, and maybe 2 inches at its long point. So all these will probably I won't sort for market until the fall or winter, because they'll need the entire summer to get to a marketable size. And then when I do sort them, there will be stuff that's perfect market size, which is 3 to 3.5 inches, and then there will be stuff that's bigger, 4, 4.5, sometimes 5-inch stuff. And that I sell separately to a few select restaurants that want a larger product like that, the gaggers basically. And those guys are for cooked oysters, mostly fried stuff, but they do other things as well. But like Himitsu's doing the selects, the big ones, and they do a cornmeal fried with like a cream reduction, and then a chili paste with powdered spinach and salt on it. It's pretty delicious. I've had a lot of really interesting stuff done to my oysters. That's one of the more interesting things.
I'm looking for shadows over these.
Oh yeah,
flat right
funny.
here.
My favorite, without a doubt, and I got to give props to my buddy Wilbur Cox Jr., who I love. He did a Tabasco sorbet with in a basil oil, so he pressed the basil for oil, and it was just those two simple ingredients on top of a raw oyster. The most amazing thing I've ever had in my entire life. It was perfect, absolutely perfect. Yeah, it's an osprey. We get a lot of osprey. We get a lot of bald eagles too, and sometimes the ospreys and the eagles fight, and the ospreys always win because they work in teams, and one of them will be going up and will get up real high and then dive bomb the top of the eagle. And while he's dive bombing and smacking the eagle in the back, the next one is working its way up to a diving position, and they just hammer the bald eagle down into the water. And they can't swim or anything, so they have to kind of work their way up with their wings to get to a shore in order to get out. It's pretty incredible. That's why I love the ospreys. They're beasts. They're smart.
Anything you look for when you put out the baskets here?
As far as, bottom and flow. I mean, you want to find a nice hard bottom so they don't sink down into the mud, because then they can get stuck and it's difficult to get them out. So sandy bottom is important. The other thing is the flow. So like this back corner where we are here, it's a far bend, and it's not near either of the mouth or the channel at the spit. This is the slowest flowing area. So this is stuff that I kind of set aside to grow slowly, because either things are moving too fast in the other areas, or I have too much market already and I don't want to let it get too big. So I have some there, and then I have some other stuff at the other end of this line over by the spit at the channel over there, and that's crazy fast flow, and that's stuff I want to move from just a little bit smaller than gagger into full gagger status. So I've set a bunch of bigger stuff over there to get over the hump into real big stuff. So that's what we're looking for with cages and kind of how you can work the area. But this is, you can see how sandy it is up here, and it stays really sandy coming out. It's not muddy in this corner, so it's a good spot to set the cages. It's also a good spot for swimming when there's not sea nettles and stingrays and sharks and all that other stuff swimming around out here.
Go to the beach.
I don't know if we're going to the beach.
If you want to go to the beach, we can go to the beach.
What about the water temperature?
Right now?
When it freezes over, how do they...
We don't really freeze, so the
I just want to go to the beach.
the mouth of the creek you can see is north facing, and so in the winter when it gets real cold, the wind's coming out of the north, and it'll actually churn the water this way and keep this from freezing up too bad. At most we'll get like a half an inch of ice around the first 10 feet or so out. So I don't really have to deal with it. The only thing I have to make sure I do is take the cages out to deep water in the winter, because we'll also get, every winter around February, we get this freak low tide where the bottom just drops out of the bay, and where we are right now, which is 15 feet from shore, would be 15 feet up land from the shore. So we'd be halfway between where the water is now and where the water will be at low tide. So if the cages aren't deep enough, they'll be exposed, and they'll die because they can't handle sub-freezing temperatures. I had a buddy who had a bunch of seed lost in that freak low tide maybe 3 Februaries ago. He lost a whole bunch, tens of thousands of oysters, and he had 2 cages that didn't end up losing anything out of them, and when he went out to see everything and kind of gave up, he noticed that those cages had salt water had sprayed over the oysters and encased each of the oysters in ice, and so all of those oysters survived because they had that insulating layer of ice. So they only got down to 32 degrees. They didn't get down to about the 8 degrees that it ended up being, and that was without the wind chill. It was a really cold one. But if they hadn't had that ice casing around them, they would have died for sure. So that was pretty interesting. I thought that was kind of cool. They got lucky like that. Because the wind, that was a screamer. The wind was screaming out of the northwest, and the way that the bay is situated, a strong northwest wind will push all the water out of the mouth of the bay. So when we get that real bad northwestern with a full moon, we get this just ridiculous low tide that drops the bottom out of the bay. And I lost a bunch of oysters the first year because I didn't know about it. And then the second year, I had everything in super deep water, and I didn't move it in shallow for the summer, and so I lost all that stuff because it wanted to be shallow for the summer, because deep water in the summertime gets deoxygenated. So first couple years, I lost a lot. I killed a lot of oysters trying to figure out my sweet spot, and now I got it down. But Yeah.
It's crazy that within 20 yards or so you can change the growth out here.
Yeah,
Like, this little spit. Just.
Yeah,
Are they gonna find something cool on the beach?
they might. We get horseshoes out here.
Really?
We get Manos clams too. I find their dead shells all the time, but I haven't caught any.
What's one of those?
It looks like a razor clam, sort of. It's all white, and they're long and skinny. They are, yeah. They were a big industry for a long time, but they got fished completely out of the bay, and now I guess they still fish them on the eastern shore of the bay because they have some certain areas that are set aside and they're allowed to do it. But in this area, they're pretty much gone. But I've seen a lot of them in the Great Wicomico, so maybe they're coming back.
That one tree is totally just gnarled by the wind out here.
Yeah, that cedar, yeah. Yeah, the cedars end up kind of cool sometimes. That one's pretty neat.
Bayberry, I think, is the other plant right here.
Yep. We get a lot of bayberry, and then that is a persimmon.
Really?
Yep.
Fruit?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that one in particular does, but I have 5 or 6 of them on my farm that fruit. My least favorite fruit. They are awful. I hate persimmons.
And they're ripe.
So clean you're out.
They're but they're ripe for like 3 seconds. There is 3 seconds in the history of that persimmon that it's ripe and it's good, and the rest of the time it's either that like bitter dries
So
your
astringent,
dries your mouth out, awful, or it's too ripe and then it's that mushy gross. And I'm not particularly fond of those. I'll eat them if I'm hungry. I forgot a lunch, but
They're good in Israel.
yeah, I can see that. This just, I guess, for whatever reason, Virginia doesn't turn out a good persimmon.
It's a good thing you're not a persimmon farmer.
Yeah, God, I would not be a very good persimmon salesman. I don't much care for them.
Let's see. Where can what's your radius if you're going to go and do like a restaurant sale or an event?
So those are sort of different. For restaurant sales, right now I'm in Baltimore, Columbia, Maryland, and Annapolis, Maryland, and I go up 301 through Southern Maryland to get to the Beltway to go up 95 to Baltimore, and then back down 97 to 301. So if you're anywhere in that route, that is totally reasonable, and I'm happy to do that. Baltimore and Columbia, Maryland are sort of my home turf, where I started with my sales and where I sort of grew up, and I had a lot of inns at restaurants, so those made sense to be a good place to start. Plus, I love Baltimore, even though she's what she is. I love her. And so now Fridays I do Washington, D.C., and I'll usually come up the same way 301, but go in Indian Head Highway and then around through like National Harbor to 495 to 695 into the city. But I could just as easily come up 17 to 95 and go up through Alexandria, Arlington, sort of the area in between those two. And I could come back that way also. So I just started in D.C. on Fridays, and I'm looking to sort of expand that, and I'm looking for new accounts. So if you're in D.C. and you're listening to this, check me out. It's sapidusfarms.com, or you can check me out on Facebook or Instagram at Sapidus Farms or at Sapidus Farms for Instagram, and I don't even know how you find it on Facebook. Just punch in Sapidus Farms. Yeah, Sapidus, Sapidus, Farms, Farms.
Something just busted the surface.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some
And
critters out there.
You got Happy Oysters?
Happy Oysters, yep. So that's the brand name for them, and that is trademarked and everything, which is kind of awesome. And I do all my own sales and distribution, so if you get a Happy Oyster, it has come from my farm in my hands to you. And there are not a whole lot of oysters out there that can make that claim.
Awesome. Well, it's awesome you get to do what you love,
I'm happy about it, yeah.
and you get to feed yourself from your work in your office.
Yep,
And you're doing a good job for the environment, too.
yep. Yeah, it's a win-win. It's a win-win all around.
Thanks for hosting us today.
Yeah, thanks for coming out.
Thank you for joining us for the Fly Fishing Consultant Podcast. For more information or to contact Rob, please go to www.robsnowhite.com.
Stone Media.